Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode here on Switch City. I'm your host, Bruce Veliz, and in today's episode, we're doing another one of our NBA offseason breakdowns and season previews, diving into each NBA team for the 2025-2026 NBA season. And in today's episode, we're going to be diving in and exploring the Los Angeles Clippers, a team that I think is going to be very exciting this season as they went and made a lot of changes to restructure their roster to go all in for a championship for these next 2 years with their core of Kawhi Leonard and James Harden. So let's dive in and let's explore what the Clippers did this offseason and how I think they're going to fare out in this wild, wild west Western Conference. Make sure to hit the subscribe button and let me know your thoughts down below in the comment section as well. So like I mentioned in the introduction, the Clippers this offseason made a lot of changes to build around this core of Kawhi Leonard and James Harden to go out and win a championship. They just recently last year lost Paul George and got some good filler pieces that really stepped up for them, and they ultimately utilized those to either get some better assets or to re-sign some of those guys and bring them back. And that's where we have the Clippers slated here this offseason after they went out and basically have turned themselves into the Unk squad, I would say, in my opinion. But even though they are a lot of older heads, and I do think they have the skill and ability to be a solid team in the Western Conference. So without further ado, let's dive in and let's go over their additions first as they bring in multiple players through free agency. First one being on this list, Bradley Beal, who was bought out by the Phoenix Suns. Beal obviously on a $50 million deal on that team with Devin Booker and Kevin Durant just wasn't a great fit. Seemingly, I thought, as a bystander watcher, something we saw similar with the Nets construction with Kyrie Irving and James Harden a couple of seasons ago with Kevin Durant. That blueprint, yes, could have made it NBA Finals and very well could have won that NBA Finals if Kevin Durant's foot wasn't on the line. But I do say that team needed to have those key role players and have those identities filled out to thrive. The Suns unfortunately didn't have that center, didn't have those good role players, and were strapped into the second apron to where they were unable to make these trades. And ultimately, that's what realistically hindered the ability to mesh this team together, seemingly like the squad over in Brooklyn. There's three players who need the ball in their hands to be their best, and there's only one basketball on the court. Now, I will say Bradley Beal on that $50 million contract as well was not that great. But now Bradley Beal on a $5 million contract, seemingly starting for the Clippers, but might even be a bench player towards the second half of the season, I think is a fantastic piece for this Clippers squad as a microwave scorer for what he can be in his ability to get hot for the Clippers if he can stay healthy. They also added Brook Lopez, who obviously is a little bit older as well, but can be that three-point shooting big and a solid rebounder, a solid spacer, playing with a rebounding forward that they got, which we'll talk about in a little bit in that backup unit, which I'm very excited to see. They also brought in Chris Paul as some great veteran depth. Obviously, Chris has spent a majority of his career with the Clippers, some of his best years. Unfortunately, injuries limited him and Blake Griffin from getting a championship, but that squad was built to be a contender in the West, and now Chris is joining this team as a veteran piece to help out with some depth. Last season, he played his first full 82 game season in a while, and that was just crazy to see that happen so late in his career. I do think for the Clippers he's not going to be utilized as much, but as some additionary depth behind some of these guys, regardless if they get some injuries or some back-to-backs, or just need the veteran leadership and presence of Chris Paul to be there in the locker room, I think it's going to be great to have him on this team. And then lastly, they added Ty Washington. Now, I don't know what Ty Washington got signed to, because the Clippers recently just waived one of their two-way players, which we'll get into in a little bit later, but with them waiving one of those two-way guys, I don't know if Washington's on an Exhibit 10. I saw that he did get signed by the Clippers, but then I did not see it on the websites of what contract he necessarily has. I don't know if it's a two-way Exhibit 10 guaranteed contract. I don't think it's a guaranteed contract, so I would most likely be thinking it is going to be a two-way, maybe that final two-way spot for this team. But ultimately, at the moment, I do not know where he's going to be. But he has been a guard coming out of Kentucky, has played with, I believe, the Bucks and the Suns last year on a two-way contract. Just someone who could be a nice young piece to baby blossom or essentially play for their G League team, which is where he'll most likely spend most of his time. They also brought in John Collins on the trade market for trading out Norman Powell, which I think was a great swap, essentially because they did bring in Bradley Beal, and I think he and Norman Powell are going to play that kind of similar role as that additional scorer and playmaker for this team. And Bradley Beal being on a $5 million deal compared to Norman Powell, who's wanting a big extension, I think is a great trade-off. They also add Collins, who's going to help in that front court with his rebounding, shot blocking, and throughout his career has been overrated, underrated at some points. Recently with the Jazz, he has been balling out, and because they have been, tanking and they're in Utah, it's not a big market. No one really has been keeping an eye on John Collins, but I do think he is going to thrive in this court, in this lineup with Brook Lopez, with that backup bench unit. And then lastly, going over their drafted players and two-way guys, the Clippers drafted two guys, one in the first round in Yannick Koenig-Niederhauser, and then in the second round they made a trade getting Kobe Sanders from the New York Knicks, trading Mohamed Diawara. They also have two-way players, Kobe Sanders being one of them, and Jordan Miller, who was a previous two-way player. They also were signed with Trenton Flowers, but he had just recently been waived, giving the Clippers that one open two-way spot to bring in someone or to utilize a guy maybe like Ty Washington as that final two-way spot. But that's the Clippers additions. Now let's go over who the Clippers ended up losing. So virtually the Clippers didn't really lose that much comparative to what they brought in. I do think their additions keep them more stacked. And for a team that had a Kawhi that barely played and was, coming into this season seemingly healthier than he has been in the past, I think this squad surprised a lot of people and could even surprise more people this season. Because in free agency, they lost Drew Eubanks, who was a late season addition. They traded for him at the deadline, giving up Mohamed Bamba. And I believe it was PJ Tucker to the Utah Jazz. Tucker was someone that they were trying to trade on that inflated contract. They got Drew Eubanks in, who was just a tertiary big or a secondary big behind Zubac. Clearly, it didn't work. They bring in Brook Lopez, who I think is a clear addition, and Eubanks goes to the Kings, where I don't really think he's going to be that effective virtually. And then Amir Coffey is a big loss, in my opinion, for this Clippers team. I do think his availability on the wing was solid as a solid defender. He had been in their rotation the last couple years as a solid catch-and-shoot scorer as well off the wing, but clearly with guys in Derrick Jones Jr., Nicholas Batum, having healthy Kawhi, younger guys in Cam Christie and Kobe Brown, that they want to kind of develop. Maybe this is why Amir Coffey is now leaving, but he could ultimately maybe find a way back to the Clippers at some point throughout his career. Who really knows? Because I do think he was a role player that they did virtually really like. Lastly, they did make one trade this season, like I mentioned, trading away Norman Powell. This was in a 3-team deal. He ended up going to the Miami Heat, as the Heat basically gave up the nonsense scraps to go to the Jazz, because the Jazz would not want Norman Powell. And because Norman Powell actually has some value, as last season he played very solid for this Clippers team. He notoriously said when Paul George left that he was going to have a bigger role this year, and that a lot of players on this Clipper team were going to prove people wrong. A lot of people laughed at that remark, and Norman Powell was right. He had a fantastic start of the season where he was looking like he could be an all-star with this Clippers team, but then unfortunately got injured and was now looking for a contract extension. And the Clippers, like I mentioned earlier in the show, are going for an all-in championship right now, with all their contracts either expiring this offseason or next offseason besides one. And that is key for the Clippers, because they're going in front of this all-in push, and if they can't do it with this core, they want to reset with free agency and have the flexibility to do so in those 2 seasons. And by signing Norman Powell, that would limit that opportunity. Therefore, I do think trading him for John Collins and once again some additional front court help for Ivica Zubac, who took that rise last year, is definitely going to be virtually key for this Clippers squad. And then lastly, looking at the 4 players that are unsigned from this Clippers team, we have Patty Mills, Ben Simmons, Seth Lundy, and Trenton Flowers. Flowers was recently just waived by the team. He was the 3rd two-way player and played with them last season. It's a little questionable on why they did that. Once again, maybe it's because they're going to sign Ty Washington or something like that. Patty Mills, I did see, is not a player anymore. I do believe is a part of a front office or is in a coaching staff somewhere in either college or Australia, I'm pretty sure. So I don't think Patty Mills is in the NBA and is a free agent. Ben Simmons, as we kind of know here at this point, is kind of like retired, not really announced, but just hasn't signed an NBA contract, reportedly declined a deal with the New York Knicks, so I don't necessarily know it's going to go with him. And then Seth Lundy, I don't believe is in the NBA as well. So that leaves the Clippers now with their roster here, looking at their depth chart, going in with their starting lineup, which I do think can change, and I will say I think has the opportunity to, but this is the best 5 players: James Harden, Bradley Beal, Kawhi Leonard, John Collins, and Ivica Zubac. I do think, like I said, that if this guard duo of Harden and Beal is not great enough on the defensive end, and it's clear they're getting beat and that they look a little bit slower with them being up in age, I do think a player in Chris Dunn, who's been a valuable piece for this Clippers squad, arguably one of their better contracts in the NBA, but their best contract on this team. He's a Swiss Army knife and has grown from the ability of being a little bit of a busted pick, but actually being able to get better in the latter half of his career. But Dunn, his ability to be a playmaker and a defender as an on-ball guy, I think is going to be solid and a catch-and-shoot scorer from three-point range if he can still hit those open opportunities to function in alongside Harden to kind of replace Bradley Beal, and also allowing either Chris Paul and Bradley Beal or Bogdanovich to kind of get working in that rotation as well to kind of fight in for those scores off the bench. Then lastly, Kawhi Leonard, I do think is going to have a good year this year alongside James Harden, hopefully with this duo trying to kind of get out ahead with them still being older and trying to win a championship. John Collins and Zubac are going to be very interesting. I don't necessarily know if they're going to work together. I could see, obviously, Collins coming off the bench and starting Batum with this lineup to give them that spacing and stretchability from the three-point line, or even throwing in Derek Jones Jr. at that power forward position as well, and having Collins and Lopez being that backup tandem in the front court, because that gives you even more flexibility, right? Imagine you have James Harden, Chris Dunn, Kawhi Leonard, Derek Jones Jr., Zubac, and then your bench is John Collins, Brook Lopez, Chris Paul, Bradley Beal, and Nicholas Batum. That's just insane. And then you still have the other players on the edges as well, and Cameron Christie, who's hopefully going to be a little bit better. Last year, his brother Max Christie obviously was traded from the Lakers to the Mavericks and had a little bit of a bounce there. Hopefully Cam can kind of do that this season. We'll obviously get to see Kobe Brown, who's been a younger piece from them. Maybe he can kind of blossom a little bit this season. Yannick Konan-Niederhauser, their first overall draft pick. I don't think he'll get much burn, but could be used as some depth. And then Derek Jones Jr. is obviously someone who was with the Clippers last year, but has had some good years across the league as a role player. I think he's going to step up and really thrive in as this Swiss Army knife switchable defender for this team, alongside Nicholas Batum has still been a little bit up there in age. So with that being said, that's the Clippers here. I do think they have some great offensive chemistry. They are a little bit older, and maybe running into some of these younger teams does slow them down, but ultimately I do have the Clippers finishing in here at 5th in the Western Conference. I do think they are a little bit better than some of these teams here in the play-in. The Lakers are obviously dealing with injuries already. The Clippers are not. The Warriors, I think, maybe could be a little bit better, but I don't think they mesh as well with the Clippers. Like I mentioned, the switchability of some of these lineups is going to be insane. To having Chris Dunn and Bradley Beal, and then who knows, Bogdanovich could be a little bit of a downplay this year with his three-point shooting ability, as he looked a little bit worse last year. But as if he has a really solid season, he was someone that was a 6th man of the year candidate a couple years ago. If he can bounce back and be a viable three-point shooter for this team, he could be solid. But if not, then he's a tradable contract to go and get that viable three-point scorer. The Clippers have the ability to realistically push all in for this championship right now and to really try to take over as that dominant team in LA and try to change things up. Obviously, the Lakers got Luka Doncic in a trade last year that was very controversial, and that kind of gives them the head start ultimately with the Lakers having that legacy as well. But with the Clippers getting their new arena, them obviously Steve Ballmer and them wanting to change the narrative of this squad, I do think that the Clippers will try to go all in and do such thing and really sacrifice all these chips to get this championship, to be that dominant team in LA. And I think that they can do that if they make the right moves. I do have them above the Spurs as well, even though I think Vic and I think as well De'Aaron Fox is going to be a great combination. I do think the Unks squad ultimately has that experience to kind of get them to this spot. I kind of honestly debated them with my number 4 squad as well, but like I said, they are a little bit older. They are called the Unks, in my opinion, and because of that, I do think in this Western Conference, there are going to be, we've seen the last 2 years, or especially last year in the NBA Finals, when looking at those two teams, the Pacers and the Thunder, they play very fast pace, and that's how we have seen the NBA kind of going in that direction. And with the Clippers, they obviously can kind of hold that, but with them being a little bit older, maybe running into some injuries, right, as we've seen with some of these older guys. Bradley Beal's had injury history, Kawhi Leonard has an injury history, James Harden, Chris Paul, Chris Dunn, Derrick Jones Jr., John Collins, Brook Lopez. There could be some people that could not live up to their full potential on this Clippers team, and it could be looking a little bit worse, and who knows, maybe then they do wait for those next 2 seasons to completely strip it all down besides Ivica Zubac and to thrive. But with Zubac having a great season last year, I think Brook Lopez complimenting him as well, I have to give this Clippers squad at least some praise in the Western Conference and give them a top 5 finish here. So let me know your thoughts down below in the comment section on what you guys think about the Clippers. Do you think they're going to be successful? Do you think they're ultimately going to be too slow, too old, run into some injury problems, not have enough depth to be able to overcome that stuff? Or do you think they're going to be just right? Like I said, we're diving into every single team before the end or before the start of the season. So let me know your thoughts down below in the comment section, as we're going to be getting into every single team, and I want to know everything about your guys' thoughts. Once again, thank you so much. Catch you guys in the next video. Have a great rest of your day, and peace out.